recording. Well, good morning, good morning. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live episode of Women Unleashed. This morning, I am very, very excited to have a beautiful guest with me, and we're going to be talking about emotionally intelligent leadership, especially for women. And for those of you who have only just tuned in to for the very first time on Women Unleashed, my name is Grace Harris. I'm your hostess with the mostess, and I am an author, international speaker, and I'm a transformational coach for women. And what I am passionate about, especially in Women Unleashed series, is helping to create intergenerational transformation. And in this series, we do have conversations that are sometimes not easy, but I always say easy conversations lead to hard life. However, hard conversations or uncomfortable conversations lead to easy life. And that's why I share with you phenomenal women with phenomenal stories and who are generous enough to sit down with me, have a conversation with me, and really deep dive into what it is that led them to this path of helping to create this transformational world and future that we are excitedly facing. And so, without further ado, I want to introduce my beautiful guest from Los Angeles. Her name is Lisa. Lisa is the CEO and founder of Big Sky Coaching, and she has an amazing podcast coming up soon, which we will be talking about a little bit later on in this conversation. But Lisa is passionate about helping us to be more enlightened about emotionally intelligent leadership, especially in the field of women rising, women speaking up, showing up, and I'm always really passionate about sharing one of the beautiful quotes I've heard many years ago when I was a younger woman, when Hillary Clinton said that the biggest untapped reservoir of talent in the world are women. And here we are. So, without further ado, Lisa, how are you, my love? Welcome.
So excited to be here with you, Grace. I think that the work that you're doing is so impactful and it is so needed at this time because the world is in a very difficult place right now, and we need leaders who are concerned about the greater good and not the chosen few. So,
Mm.
leadership style really needs to evolve and rise.
I love how you said for the greater good instead of the chosen few. It gives me goosebumps because the greater good have always been, people see it. I think as humanity, we've always been able to see the greater good. However, we look at it and I'm talking thousands of years, hundreds of years back, is that we look at the greater good and we think to ourselves, well, how is that going to serve me as an individual? So it's always been divisive, it's always been individualistic, it's always been about what's in it for me. And so the greater good had to be put in the back burner, so to speak. And to be able to speak about this today, and for me, I'm actually already getting emotional to be able to host a conversation like this. For me is and I encourage everyone. You might not want to go live on Facebook, you might not want to go live on YouTube, you might not want to do anything about it in terms of written article, but when you're in your kitchen table, in the dining table, in your lounge room, with your family, with a girlfriend, talk about the deep and meaningful stuff, especially about self leadership and collective leadership. And so, Lisa, okay, so please walk me through about your journey because I have met this woman, by the way, for all of you who are listening here. I've actually been able to share the stage with her. And I remember I was sitting on my seat and listening to Lisa talk, and I was so moved by the energy and the power of her passion and her conviction about what she talks about that I couldn't help myself and actually say to her, "Look, it was just an amazing experience for me listening to you." And I knew I had to have her on Women Unleashed. And Lisa, what was your journey that got you to a place of empowering women to to go for what they really want?
I have to say I'm a little biased, Grace. I really am, because women are naturally powerful, strong, capable, and we run into a little hiccup. That is that we are tasked with the impossible. We roll up our sleeves. We get it done. We jump in, we start swimming, we take care of others, and yet sometimes we put ourselves at the back of the line. And so one of the messages that I really have that I have to tell myself daily is if you don't practice self-care, then you're really only running at about 80 to 50% efficiency for everyone else you're trying to help. So I would say, I want to circle back to what you asked me. How did I get started? I actually had a career as a performing artist, and I sprained my hip doing a music video in the 1980s when I was living in New York. And I got really scared because I had no health insurance. I couldn't walk. I couldn't work. I couldn't teach. I couldn't rehearse. I couldn't perform. And I met a woman at a party who worked two separate jobs. She worked for a company, cable network called Showtime, and she freelanced for a local ABC affiliate. And I told her my tale of woe, and she said, "Oh, well, do you know what time code is? Because I'm doing this sweepstakes promotion. I've got 100 tapes and I need someone to screen them." And I was like, "I know what time code is. I can screen tapes, I can write notes." And that was how I fell into television backwards. And I ultimately ended up working at Showtime. And then I went to a small pay-per-view service, and then I went to a competitor, and then I went to another cable company, and I ended up in sports television. And through that journey, I started realizing that people who were in leadership roles weren't necessarily leaders. They had titles, but they didn't know how to motivate and inspire their staff. And I also saw they weren't really great at communication. So, when I started out, I was what I was called a promo producer. And so I wrote copy and cut tape, producing these 30-second spots for movies. And someone would come and say, "Oh my gosh, you didn't do this X, Y, and Z." And I was like, "I didn't know I was supposed to." And I started realizing that when you worked with people and you said, "Here's your area of expertise. I know you're going to do a great job. Here's the 3 things you need to include and you need to know about when you do your job." And all of a sudden, productivity rose, things got delivered on time. It's so interesting, when you're told something that you have to do as a child, and as a kid, you might say, "Why? Why? Why?" When that is really answered and you understand why, then you get buy-in. Then you can actually do that thing you're being asked to do to the best of your ability. So that was, I would say, about 1992. I was working for a boss who was not great at communicating. And I started making connections in other departments, asking for information. I started to realize, wow, if I get that manager title, I can tell people why we're doing this thing. And then they do a better job because they understand how they can deliver to the best of their knowledge. And it was this really very enlightening little aha, which I'm sure many people have had, but for me, it was huge. And that's when I decided I want to get into roles of higher leadership so I can communicate and explain why we're doing what we're doing, so everybody can actually do their job to the best of their ability. I do want to share one thing before your next question, which is it does not matter what your title is. If you motivate and inspire yourself and you motivate and inspire other people, you're a leader. It doesn't matter what your title is. You'll be seen as that.
Thank you for sharing that because I you said something in effect to that. You said, wow, if I get that title, then I can communicate and explain to people why this is good and why we're going to do this. Really, you were embodying the essence of leadership, except you didn't have the title. So leadership is such an internal thing.
Yes.
I always say to my ladies, my women, is that to be a leader of anything or anyone, you must first be a self leader. And self leadership begins with self awareness and goes all the way to self mastery. And it takes in, and I want to just acknowledge what you said. You know, some people have titles, but they don't really have the leadership. And I think that that's what we're trying to communicate here is there are so many of us women who will be listening to this who feel the same as you and me have felt, that we want to do good. However, we are lacking leadership that we can follow well, and we want to be leaders ourselves, but we can't be cultivated or motivated or nurtured to become the leaders that are in us because the people who have the titles can't see the potential. So it's like it's not a simple dynamic. So Lisa, how did you navigate that environment of you had that essence of leadership. You wanted to do good and be the leader worth following, but you didn't have the title. So how did you navigate this?
Right. Um, I will two notes. One, because as women, we are such creative problem solvers. When you have a solution in a crisis that you can execute, especially because my background is corporate, and in the corporate arena, especially in live television, people get really like, woo, they lose it. There's a lot of bad language. There's a lot of um, people just losing their minds. And as women, you know that you want to make sure everybody's accounted for. You want to make sure no one's hurt. You want to make sure that everybody is taken care of and you have your solution. So in a corporate environment, or honestly, any environment, when you have a solution that you can execute, you will be seen and recognized as a leader and you will be rewarded. And that was how I started climbing the corporate ladder because I knew my function, I knew the ins and outs, and I built a network of people I could reach out to and say, how does it work in finance? How does it work in IT? What are you doing in marketing? What are you doing in business development? And so I cultivated these relationships, and women are great at that. Let's acknowledge we're really good. We're empathetic. We're able to walk into a room and know exactly if someone had a fight there 10 minutes before, or if something happy was going on, or if people are anxious. And we immediately go into, let me take care of you. Now, I do want to say, we all need to remember to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first, but we're very intuitive. And so when we can solve a crisis, which we're just hardwired to do that, we will be recognized. The other thing I want to share, and for those people who work in a corporate environment, this can catch us as women. We love all the details. If Grace and we were talking before we got on this live feed, and we were talking about, oh, all the details. We want to know how we were doing and what we were up to, and give me the 411. In a business setting, it's 3 points. What happened? How did you fix it? And let's keep going. Let's move on. So I refer to this as our, if for those of you who have children, we have the inside voice and the outside voice. And for those of us who work in a business environment, or let's say we're going into an environment like we're going to go buy a car. So we walk into a dealership. We have to think of our business voice, our business thought and speech versus our at home thought and speech. When we're at home, we want all the details. When we're in a business environment, 3 bullet points. What was the problem? How do you want it fixed? And let's keep moving. Do we agree on this? And if you don't, then you can extricate yourself from that conversation, find another place to buy your car. It's kind of a bad example, but as women, we want all the details, but in a business environment, 3 bullet points, keep moving. So
Yeah.
that's something we kind of need to keep in the back of our head. And then you can talk about the details when you're one on one with your special friends.
It's a real art, isn't it, when it comes to it's having the balance of the yin and the yang is what I'm hearing from you. The details are always going to be there. You are privy to that because as a woman, you know all of that. But also as a woman, you have the capacity to encapsulate the details into the 3 points as to what happened, how did we fix it, or how can we fix it, and then moving on, what is it gonna look like. And we do have, and this is what I've learned as a well, as an ex-corporate person myself, is that especially with office politics, like there could be
Yes.
a situation where there's a lot of hearsay and there's a lot of this happened and that happened, but there's one existing incident or issue, and everyone's just circling or mingling around it and not really addressing this addressable, tangible issue that when you put light into it and just know that the details are in the background but they're not necessarily relevant in the presentation right now. They can even be I don't know, things that you just know under the rug that you could use to support conversations later on, but just knowing how to really artistically, if you will, or
Yes.
strategically, if you
Yes.
will, if you like,
Both.
yeah, to present it right.
Right. Right.
And you, yes, so Lisa, you help women get what they want when it comes to the corporate ladder. Now, I'm very interested in this topic because I'll share something personal with you. I have a daughter; she's 20, and her path so far has been really pleasantly amazing to me because in Australia you finish high school at age 18 and then you look at going into university or not, either way. And
Mhm.
she was doing journalism in university, and that happened during the COVID time, and it didn't feel right because of COVID and everything. And so she thought, I'll take a break from uni and I'll see what goes on. And so now she's found herself in under 12 months with two promotions, and now as a finance and admin manager in a in engineering firm. And I thought, wow, she's only 20 years old. And I thought, how amazing, because during my time
Yes.
I would not have been able to navigate that kind of environment at age 20 in the way that she has.
Mhm.
And so the emotional intelligence of younger people right now is something that it's almost as if the older generation needs to catch up on it because
Yes.
there's an essence of owning what I'm worth for especially for millennials like children like my daughter's age. And
Mhm.
so I wanna ask you about this, Lisa. How do you help women? Um, what's going on in their minds?
Well, sometimes, and this is the social uh, norm, the cultural expectation, and the societal norms, where, when I was growing up as a kid, I was told, stay in your, not by my parents, but at school, I was told, stay in your chair, do your work, be quiet, you'll get rewarded, you'll get acknowledged. And in business, that does not work. What happens is they go, oh, great worker, more work, no compensation. Oh, does a really awesome job, will always over deliver, more work, no pay increase, no title. So you have to be able to speak to your expertise. And for some of us, it's easier than others because as women, we've been told, don't brag. That's really bad. No one's going to like you if you brag. But you have to be able to talk about your accomplishments and what you've done in the past and your potential what you can offer any employer. So I would bet, Grace, that your daughter is really someone who raises her hand and says, "Oh, let me help. I can figure this out." Because this is millennials. They're just, and Gen Z too. They're very much like, "Give me the tech. I'll figure it out." Nothing really phases them. They grew up with it. Whereas someone like me, and I'll acknowledge I have some mileage. I'm a baby boomer. I look at this and I go, "How do I drive this? I don't know how to drive this." So for everyone, when you volunteer in a work environment and you say, "I'll figure it out," then you must say, "I'm so glad you found this useful. What else can I help you with?" So that you right away set the narrative of, "I helped you," whoever that you is, probably someone in senior management, get done what you needed to get done to drive the revenue to the bottom line, to make business more productive. You want to start talking as a woman, especially. This is not bragging. It's just, if you told a friend, "I really like shoes. I like to buy shoes." It's the same thing as saying at work, "I am really good with numbers. I can create a budget for you. I can maintain it. I can determine it. I can implement it. I can justify it. And I can make sure we're not a penny over." That's not bragging. It's just like saying, "You like shoes? I'm good with numbers." It's really the same thing.
Wow. It's the art of acknowledging yourself and not having to wait for validation or acknowledgement that may never come.
Correct.
Mm.
Correct. Correct. That's exactly right.
Yeah, for a lot of scenarios, it may never come. You may always have to have the pile of paperwork. If you are always quiet about, I used to be called often when I was in corporate, and now I look back and I'm thinking to myself, wow, Lisa, you're really speaking to my old self here. I could have used the skills because I've heard the words, you're a quiet achiever, and I'm thinking back now, I would have said, well, I'm glad you found it helpful. Instead of just being a quiet achiever, because that's what I did, right? I People would ask me, and I had speed, I had efficiency, and I'll
Mhm.
deliver, and then I'll go back to my little desk, and I'll do my little job, and then I'll just wait for another thing that they can't handle on their own, and I'll be glad to be of service, and and then the day would end. I'll repeat tomorrow, and then the next year, and so it's the art of knowing. It starts with self worth, doesn't it? Like you say,
Yes.
yeah, there's a lot of conditioning around. Yeah, I was born in the 70s and maybe even in the 80s. That, yes, if you are quiet and peaceful and don't make a fuss, then you're okay. And
Great. And that's kind of expected of women to not really speak up for themselves. But in a business setting, you need to do it in a way that is authentic because I like to joke. Not everybody likes to joke. I can be somewhat sarcastic. That doesn't work for everybody. So every woman needs to find their voice, but not needing that external validation and knowing I really am good with numbers, or I'm really good with solutions and strategies, or I'm really good at marketing presentations. And here I think is the key is to not diminish that. Because so many times as women, when things come easily to us, we go, "Oh, everybody can do this." Mm-mm. Oh no. Oh no. And that's what we need to be able, you use the word self-aware, Grace. You got to be able to take that 1,000-mile view and go, I have done some things that really did help other people. And people come to me and ask me for help with certain things. Let me acknowledge that and realize I have these gifts and talents, and I have this experience, and I have this expertise. And so I really am helping business develop, and I am helping my staff and my team develop. So it's just acknowledging because we all tend to do this. Oh, it came to me so easily. Everybody can do this. Oh no,
yeah, yeah,
not.
yeah. I think that's a big one. I don't think we say it enough, or we acknowledge that fact enough, that as women, we tend to think that because it comes naturally to us, it must be, it's just, it's a nothing thing, when in fact it's one of our
Eh,
brilliance is
correct.
that we have to be able to put a light on that. But
Correct.
I'm really called to ask you a question about um, when it comes to in a corporate environment, when it comes to dealing with politics and conflict, and you
Hmm.
talk about presenting in a way that we have a clear and concise what happened, um, what can be done or what you suggest to be done, and how do we move forward from here. How do we infuse that with our energy, honoring ourselves as women and not having to cave into the patriarchal battle of feeling like we've got to have, well, he's got the black suit, I better don my black suit on as well. And it's power to power, really, when it doesn't have to be. We've got our own different kind of how do you teach women to become authentic in their power?
There are so many ways to that. And there are people who are far smarter than I am who have like written books on this. But I would say it starts with really understanding what you bring to the table. So you really have to know what you're good at. And an easy way to determine that is to go and ask people you trust, what do you come to me for help with? And then keep a log when people come and ask you for help. Look at the patterns. I would bet that if everybody just kept, a little notebook and wrote down what you were asked for help about with over the course of a week, and then you went back with one of these, I love these, the highlighters, and you'd start to see a pattern and you'd start to say, well, people have to have tough conversations. They always want to come to me and use me as a touchstone and kind of understand how they could maybe take a really harsh message. And it's called the sandwich, where, oh, you did this great. I want to see you do this better, but you did this other thing great, to make the message more palatable. Or maybe people are coming to you for, I don't understand how to put this strategy together. We need to create this new product or this new message or whatever it might be. What's the strategy there? You need to start asking yourself, what do people come and ask me for help with? And then you ask yourself, well, what are the things that I'm naturally drawn to that I like doing? And write it down. Don't type it. You've got to write it because you want that right lobe connection. The right lobe is the creative, musical, visual, whereas the left lobe of the brain is the logical, linear, our voice, our ability to reason. And you want to write down what people are coming and asking you for help with. And you want to write down what you really enjoy to do, those things that you do that make you lose time. And then hand it. This is one thing I think is really important. We all need a circle of support, meaning this is someone who's a trusted friend, a trusted colleague, maybe a sibling or a relative, someone who's known you for a long time, and potentially a mentor. And you can go and have that conversation about, well, what do you come to me and ask me for help with? What do you think I'm good at? And then that difficult question, what are my blind spots? And so through that whole process, you want to ask for the insight. You want to watch your reactions. You want to analyze the insights you receive from your trusted circle of support. And then you start to recognize the patterns, which is a big one because you start to go, oh, when I hear someone yelling, I immediately want to retract. Great. That is a really good thing to know. When that happens, just get yourself up out of that situation and leave. But when you've asked for the input, you've watched your reaction, you've analyzed the insights you get, you recognize the patterns, then you can start to envision a new way of being that is going to serve you better. And not just serve you better, but serve everyone. Because let's just acknowledge, as women, we are hardwired 100,000 years of evolution to ensure survival of the species. We're also extremely creative. We're creative problem solvers, and we're actually creators in the highest sense because we can create life. So that is super potent. And we tend to just think, Oh, there's the guy in the suit and he's telling me what to do. Well, let me watch him for a bit and let me offer him some suggestions that will help him. So you don't have to change your communication style, but just be aware of it. And
Mm,
there's so much I could talk on about
yeah.
this. I'm not sure I really answered your question, Grace.
You have, because essentially what I heard from you say is the transformation can be very, very subtle. Starts with self-awareness and of, say, your patterns, your reaction. And when you there's a saying by Marianne Williamson, personal transformation is ultimately going to be the seed of worldwide revolution, because as we individually transform and go through the transformation, and so does the world, because we have that power. And so when, like you said, as women, we have this potent power to create and maintain the, what is life. And so
Right.
having that knowing, but also having the awareness that I can change the way I react for the
Yes.
greater good, then that
Yes.
becomes that potent thing. And it's subtle, but it's potent, it's transformational. Because when you do it on a consistent basis, awareness of your reactions and repatterning in your mind
Mhm.
and in your behaviors and your reaction, what you'll find is if you look at a week's time or a month's time and have that perspective, you created a transformation in that environment that was very subtle, that no one even noticed, but it's
Right.
because of your power to be self-aware and the knowing that you have the actual power to do it. And that's why it's a beautiful thing to empower women in this way, because even though it sounds a little bit simplistic the way we talk about it like this, in real life, in real situations, when you walk through that door with your suit or high heels or makeup or whatever it is,
Whatever. Right.
like you say, there's always that stimuli, the trigger, someone in your face or
That,
someone. And then,
exactly.
yeah, so when you remember it every day and you embody it every day, every single day, instead of once a month, it's
Right.
the creation of the transformation can be ultimately surprising, especially to yourself, I'd say. Yeah.
Right. There's that saying, practice makes permanent, because we are perfectly imperfect as human beings, right? We're going to react, we're going to get triggered. But when you can continue to go, oh, I mean, I know for me, people yelling, that is a very big trigger for me. I grew up in a household where we laughed and shouted, Italian household, but it was always in joy. And I was like, what are we having for dinner? What it was always happiness. And the first time I ran into a boss of mine who was the screamer, I was like, he did not. And I started to realize that was a big trigger for me. So I would just suggest that for anybody watching this, the next time you feel triggered, and anybody in a situation where they were yelled at unfairly absolutely would feel triggered, take a breath and just think, this is not about me. This is about a pattern that person established. How do I want to respond to it? Because quite honestly, you could react by going, and that may not serve you in that situation. So take a breath and just consider, how do I want to respond? Because your reaction is completely normal. So again,
Mm,
it practice makes permanent.
yes. I mean,
Not perfect, because we are never going to be perfect. That's not in our reality as human beings. It's
yeah.
not.
I love that. Practice makes permanent. And it's true, isn't it? When you have the ability to just be aware and make it a habit, it's really transformational for you. So thank you for sharing that. But Lisa, I want to shift the conversation now for a bit to leadership. So,
Yes.
as a leader, especially as a female leader, because there's a lot of talk about from the macro perspective.
Mhm.
For example, let's pick a specific topic, like let's say workplace bullying. It's been found,
Hazing. Yeah. Hazing. Yeah.
yeah, it's been found statistically that women are less likely to come forward and talk about the feelings of having been bullied. And because of this numerical statistical fact, what happens is there's more turnover in staff, there's more absenteeism, there's less productivity. Ultimately,
Yes.
the profit is not as optimized as it can be. And so, what lies in the hands of leaders is that how, especially if for a woman leader, how do you act as a leader so you can encourage total transparency, and really allow those people to speak up and feel like they are supported? How do we do
Mhm.
this?
So what we're talking about is a toxic work environment, and use the phrase bullying, and I use the phrase hazing. And unfortunately, some people who are in roles of authority, who are leaders in title only, they feel much bigger when they can demean other people. So I would say to anybody watching this recording, if you're working in an environment that is toxic and you're not in a leadership role, look for another job. If you cannot do that, then try and remove yourself as best you can from those toxic people. In terms of leadership, I mean, I'll be very direct. I worked in a male dominated industry for the last 15 years of my career. And as I got into, I ended up as a senior vice president, and I was often the only woman at the table. So sometimes there were jokes made that were crude. And my response was, would you say that in front of your mother? And then I'd lean back and I'd shut up and I'd just kind of look at him. And I know a very effective way to shut someone down. I was being sexually harassed, and I said, how do you think your wife would feel if she knew you were talking to me that way? And that, but really, that the environment comes from the top. So if you're in an environment where senior management, these are the people in the C suite, are not about equity in the workplace, are not about diversity, are not about inclusion, are not about fairness, um, that is not a place you want to work. And my first recommendation would be get your resume together and leave. If you're in a leadership role in an environment like that, then you need to find the one leader who agrees with you that that is not a healthy environment and work together to try and change it. And some of it is so ingrained, it is really going to take uh, a very significant act to break that apart and to change it. And it's something we all need to work on to try and improve. But as women, the minute you're in an environment where you feel like you're being bullied, Amanda Gorman, who was the poet laureate at Joe Biden's inauguration, has this great saying, which is no is a full sentence. And you have to say no and then get yourself out of that situation. Either no, that is not acceptable. No, you cannot talk to me that way, or no, and get up and leave. And then you want to talk to anyone in your circle of support and just say, this is what happened. And if you really want to go the corporate route, which I would recommend anybody working corporate does, you send yourself an email on your company email that clearly lists, at this time, this individual, use their title, said this to me. And my response was, that is not acceptable. And send yourself that email so you've got a record of it. Because, you know, we're seeing so much today where many people are giving it lip service, but they're not really doing anything to change it. And so as women, it is super difficult, which is why you want your circle of support. And it should include men. It shouldn't be all women because, you know, especially men who are fathers are beginning to see my daughter's going to get paid less simply because she's a girl when she starts working. My daughter's not going to be open to those professional opportunities simply because she's a girl. There's a mindset shift happening now, which is great. We just need to encourage it. And so you have to be able to say no, you have to be able to set the boundary. And if you're not even comfortable doing that, get yourself up and out of that situation, send yourself an email, talk to someone you trust in the work environment, and at least say, this is what happened. I am not comfortable with it.
Wow. I think one of the most important points you've made there that should be happening all the time is for some of us, there could be a bullying incident at this hour, and you cannot remove yourself at the exact hour. It could be you might have to wait 30 minutes or later on. But the most one of the most important things that Lisa pointed out is that detail of that incident has to be recorded, whether with someone or just by yourself, because it's so. I cannot stress its importance enough because when once you lose the moment of recording that, you might lose it forever. And it's worked in my case. I had when I was back in corporate, I did have an incident where I finally had to say, this is enough. I am not accepting this kind of treatment anymore. And I did have the records of things that happened to me and things that happened to my colleagues. And I did write the email. At the time, though, it wasn't to myself. It was because I knew that the corporation was at the cusp of really changing into a
Mhm.
much more people culture centered kind of environment, and I trusted the new cultural conditioning, and I knew we were leaning into that. So I had a knowing and a feeling and a faith in myself that yes, I could lose my job, but I know that this corporation is looking towards leaning into looking after their staff more and letting go of the dinosaurial kind of management style. And I wanted to
Right.
do my bit. So I've done the work of I'm confident enough that whatever happens, I'm doing my part, because I also asked myself the question, if I don't stand up for myself now, what can I say to my children when because my kids were very little, and I look at them, and one day I woke up and asked myself, why am I going back to this job? And the reason was because of them, because of the mortgage, because of my kids, to role model to my kids that as a single parent I do have, a sense of purpose, a sense of self-empowerment. But then I looked at the flip side of the coin, where I'm always feeling like SHIT when I'm at work. And so I thought that's not really in integrity of what I want to role model to my kids. And so, as a woman, what can I say to them once when they're old enough to ask me about mom? What do I do? And so it really worked for me at the time. And so everyone's situation is different. In fact, instead of losing my job, 6 months later on, I was promoted to my first leadership role, and now role modeling to my daughter. She's now in the place where she is. It could be different for you, but what, like Lisa said, is that walk away. And if you can't walk away straight away, record that incident, and that support as well. This is what I didn't have, is the support. I was so scared. I didn't have support, and I had a friend that I had to I haven't spoken to her for like 4 years, and all I could think of was her, because I knew she used to deal with these types of negotiations, mediations. And so I contacted her, and so don't be scared to ask for help, even if you feel like, oh, I haven't spoken to them for a long time, what would they say? um, if you know that it's a good cause. And always when it comes to transformation, especially with um, corporate is a very really really big part of the way that we live. We need
Yeah.
these corporations forever in the day, because they create part of the civilization, they give jobs. But we do need everyone to be safe in these types of environment, including our children. And to be able for them to be safe in that environment, we need to actually live up to what we preach, right? As parents, or
Yeah.
at least as mentors, or as leaders, or as coaches who actually teach self empowerment and self leadership. Which brings me to my most exciting thing that I want to discuss with you, Lisa, is you have this beautiful podcast coming up soon, launching very soon, and you've
Yes.
named it something very, very cool. I'm going to leave it with you to tell us about it. I know what it is, but yeah, I can't. Tell us about your launching podcast and what it's about.
So, Grace, I have to say that you really inspired me, because when we met in Paris, and you talked to me after I had been on stage, and then I heard your speech and I talked to you, and we had that moment of like, oh, sister, oh, there was just that feeling of warmth. Um, And I want to also share, I'm a little bit scared. I am, because I've never done a podcast before, and we'll just see how it all goes. But it's called Grace, Grit, and Getting It Done. Because as women, we do have access to what I would refer to as the divine feminine power that is far bigger than any of us, far bigger, that we can tap into. We also have grit because we are going to, if it kills us, we're going to do it. And what I want to suggest to everybody is ask for help. We can't be good at everything. Acknowledge what we're really good at, and those things that we don't like to do that we're not good at, ask for help. There are people who want to help you. We are, it's part of the greater community. And the getting it done, we are going to get it done. And there is so much to be done. So this podcast is going to be focused on women who want to stop the self-doubt and the self-denial and move into a leadership role so that they can bring the change that makes the difference and make the difference that creates long-lasting change. So,
Wow.
and Grace, you've gracefully accepted my invitation to be on my podcast. So your message is just so empowering and so important at this time, because there's such an energetic ability here within all women, whatever we do, whether we've ever worked in corporate or not. For those people who are listening who say, oh, but I'm a stay-at-home mom, what can I do? Oh my gosh, you have the most important job in the world. You are helping a human being to reach their greatest potential. That's far more important than making a widget or putting something on TV. That's my background. I mean, TV or streaming or whatever. Mothers have the most important job in the world because you're directing the future. So wherever you are, whether you work inside the home, outside the home, um, you are a very powerful person as a woman. So don't short yourself. Put the oxygen mask on yourself first. Step into your power. Grace talked about the dinosaur mentality of leadership, the command control, the Jurassic
Mm.
era. It's falling apart. We are seeing today again and again in corporate that type of leadership is not working. People are leaving jobs. Things are changing very dramatically. You need enlightened leaders. You need leaders that are emotionally intelligent. And wherever you are, whatever you're doing, if you motivate and inspire someone else to do something they didn't think they could do or they didn't know how to do, that's the definition of a leader. You're a leader. So that's what Grace Grit and Getting It Done is going to be about.
I love it.
And
Thank you.
and very much like what we've been talking about today, because this was like such an honor for me to, I had so much fun today. I want to thank you. I
Me
really
too.
did.
I
Like
love
so
it.
empowering is like, yes, yes, we can change the world. Yes,
There's always
yes,
that energy. I love and I love the unity of your podcast name, the Grace, Grit, and Getting It Done, because for me, I feel that up until very recently, we've had the grit and getting it done, the divine masculine and getting it done, but the divine feminine had been like 1%, 2% in the mix of it all, which is why it's wonky, right? Which is why
yeah,
it's really not working. And
right.
yeah, and to infuse the balance of the divine masculine and the divine feminine to get it done the way that it is really balanced and the way that we can cosmically transform into the full potential of not only us as individuals but of the world, because our potential is just so untapped at the moment. In fact, we
Yeah,
are often ending up ruining things. We have stuff like incomprehensible stuff like the war and whatnot, and talk about Jurassic effect, like really just obliterating stuff that could be obliterating life force and life
yes,
form. And so I
Yeah.
cannot wait to be part of the podcast. I cannot wait to actually, promote it on to the women that I speak to, because that message is so important. Because, like you said, even if you don't think that you have the leadership, you are a leader, you don't need the title. I When you said that, Lisa, I was instantly transported to 20 years back when I was living in Manila, and I
Mhm.
was a single woman. And I don't know if for any of you who had been to Manila, it's a really quite a intense city. And on the streets, there, you'll see all sorts of different things. And I remember just helping people on the streets. On Some of them can't walk, or some of them are lost, and some of them are just a little bit crazy, and just really having that self leadership to know that if I could just at least help one person today for like 2 minutes or 5 minutes, then I know that I have done something for someone, that allowed
Right.
them to see that there is goodness in the world, that there is goodness in them, that someone had seen it in them, that the day is going to get better for them. That
Yes.
is a seed of leadership. And if you, I bet everyone who's listening right now, that's happened to you at some point. You have the seed of leadership. And emotionally intelligent leadership is really the seed of a positive transformation. And so it's been such a beautiful time to be able to reinforce this message with you, my love, on this live series today. What I want to ask from you is that a couple of things. How can we have more of you? Where do we find you? Where do you hang out most on social media? And also, what would be your last wisdom for our listeners today?
You can find me at bigsky.coach. You can find me at bigskycoach_Lisa_Gillette on Instagram. And you can also find me on Facebook at Lisa Gillette, Big Sky Coach. So I think, one, I want to say thank you so much. This was such an energizing, I feel so full right now. We had been talking before we went live today of, everything, I said, I have many plates spinning. I'm trying to not let them fall on my head. But I feel so energized right now. And I think the last thing that I would like to share is that when you see the big picture, you will find the opportunity. So let go of that little voice, which we all have, that says, oh, you could have done that better, or you didn't do that right, or we all have that little voice. Just know that you can say, yeah, but I'm trying my best, and I am going to make a difference, and I am going forward, and my intention is good. And even if I make a mistake, my intention is pure to make things better. So just to acknowledge that, and to look to, stop that sort of self, like, oh my gosh, I didn't do that right, which I have to do at least 3 hours every day, and look up and see the big picture and see where you can make the change to make it better and find the opportunity.
Amazing. Thank you so
You're amazing. You're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's been beautiful hanging out with you once again. Lisa, thank you so much. I am blessed to be surrounded by women like you. And I don't, yeah, it's something that I have just discovered this year, that when you have the vision to have a collective of phenomenal women, all you have to do is put it out there and ask exactly what Lisa was saying. Look at the big vision and know that your intention is pure and your intention is good. And that is exactly what Women Unleashed is for you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, everybody. We love you, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.